Hey friends, my name is Milind Prabhu, CEO at Genora Infotech. As we all speculate, when do we go back to work again? As we all try and understand how do we get through these difficult times, we thought we would make a series and get some of the industry veterans, startups, successful startup entrepreneurs to share with us their experiences as to how they're dealing with the situation and how do they expect to come out and what are the possible outcomes from this situation and possible opportunities that are going to come out. So let's hear from them. So let's get started with our first panelist, Luke Sequira. Luke, I would let you introduce your startup and your role at the startup and your journey till now.
Sure. Thanks, Milind. So how do we start this? I'm Luke Sequira. I'm from Saligaon in Goa. I now live in Donapal. I run a company called Numadic, which builds supply chain monitoring software. And I run an organization called Startup Goa, which is part of the Goa.me network, which helps to sprout technology companies in Goa. My focus is mainly logistics, and that's my passion as well.
All right. Yep.
Thanks, Will.
Uh, Moving on to Shameel. Shameel would love to have a quick intro about your startup, what you do, and your role at the company as well.
Sure, sure. So I'm the co-founder of Clootrack. So at Clootrack, what we do is we help brands understand what customers think about them. So it's a kind of a platform which helps brands understand customer perceptions, customer insights, consumer behavior in a very, very fast manner. It's a kind of an alternative to market research, traditional market research, I would say. So traditional market research is an exercise which takes like 2 to 3 months, but with a platform like Clootrack, you can do it within like 3 4 days. So that's what we do, and we work with a lot of large consumer-facing brands today in India and abroad. Yeah, that's what I would say. What Clootrack is all about. And glad to be with you guys in discussing on this COVID scenario. We are into a totally new world order today, I would say, and maybe this is a very very historic experience. Like maybe you have seen this only in Hollywood movies. That's what we are experiencing today, and what we're going to see is some sort of a drastic change in the way we all behave in terms of our personal lives, our professional lives, in terms of markets, in terms of governments, and uh, and thanks for arranging this call.
Shamil, what is the industry segment that you work with the most, and
So
how
we
was it impacted?
Yeah, so we work with highly consumer-facing verticals, mainly FMCG, automotive, travel and hospitality, consumer electronics, banking and finance. So in this, as you see, most of them are very, very highly consumer-facing. Travel and hospitality is like impacted the most, I would say. Automotive is also impacted heavily. In terms of consumer FMCG goods, apart from the essentials, the other segments are having a big beating too. So that's where it is. Banking and finance right now also it is working pretty well. Consumer electronics, again, discretionary spending, people have come down, and because of that reason, segments which are like highly discretionary in spending, like televisions and so on, has come down, while laptops and so on has gone up. So this is the kind of impact what we are seeing among the customers. But there are very very interesting ways in which even the brands out there are responding to this crisis, I would say. uh, so initially, like when the lockdown started off in India, or maybe a month before in Europe, there was a lot of confusions around, even I would say among our customers as to how to react to this scenario. Because economic turmoil, what is going to happen is going to be significant. And in this scenario, how should a brand react to this turnaround of stuff what is happening around? Because the extent of the downturn is highly unclear. Like whether it is going to be 2 months, 3 months, 10 months, 18 months is very very unclear at this point of time. And what should, as a brand, they should be doing? So initial couple of weeks, we found a lot of confusion among the brands themselves as to how they should react. But what one interesting aspect what we are finding today, like brands who are solid, who have been around for like several decades, right? They have seen these kind of downturns earlier also. So what they are doing is like they are turning this downturn to their advantage. Of course, they are taking steps to cut the costs. At the same time, they are putting up mechanisms so that they can rebound faster and better when the market comes back. Because when you look at all these big brands, one of the important problems they were always having was disruptions from outside. Somebody comes from outside and disrupt them altogether, and they have been always under this threat. And there were several segments which are like which are highly you know having an uptrend, but they can't gain share in that because they are not ready to do it. And somebody has come and disrupted. Simple example is like it can be electric, it can be like shared mobility, it can be things like mobile wallets. These are things which the traditional industry was not ready, and they were disrupted. So now brands are finding this as an opportunity to gain pace in those segments, come back, get a deep footing, and then be ready, and then get back to action when the market comes back.
All right, all right. I'll come back to Luke. Luke, uh, as far as the fleet industry is concerned, there looks to be a total halt except for the essential goods. So
Yeah.
how is your business impacted? Look, what do you see the how do you see the scenario improving, and how long would it take?
Yeah. So I think there are three levels of impact for us in terms of business. One is the impact at the truck owner and truck driver level, which doesn't directly impact us because we don't directly transact with them. But any impact to them will obviously have some cascading effects down the line to us. The second level of impact is with the forwarders and the transporters that are dealing with these truck companies and dealing with the actual consigners of the goods. That's where we start to feel our first level of impact, because many of these companies are now starting to run into cash shortfalls. So when it comes to paying for our SaaS services and paying for our platform, we're starting to hit some bottlenecks on these fronts. And thirdly, in terms of the actual consigners and large shippers that work with us, that we consult with on the supply chains, on the analytics of the supply chains, here it's a bit of a mixed bag. On the one hand, we're seeing some customers, especially the smaller ones who have tight cash flow issues, unable to actually make payments or deliver at their end of our contracts. On the other hand, we have larger players, some significantly large players in the industry who see this as an opportunity, just like Shameel was saying. And for them, this is a way to consolidate their position in the market. So in fact, if anything, they're looking out for even more solutions and analytics data from us on the state of supply chain industry in India. So for us, it's, I would say, at the end, it's an unfortunate situation because nearly 30 to 40 lakh trucks are sitting idle out there. At the same time, it's a opportunity in the sense that it's going to transform how logistics in India works, because if anything could have been a trigger for digitalization of trucking in India, this would be it, and it's now starting to happen in a big way.
Got it. Look, I would want you to explain this in more detail.
Sure.
Every industry is looking for opportunity. The moment this lockdown comes out, a lot of e-commerce companies are looking at opportunities because people are changing their mindset. So how do you see
Yes.
the space shift because of this opportunity?
Yeah. So I think on the B2C front, I'm not very adept in that industry or knowledgeable in that space. So I won't have much to comment. But on the B2B front, especially in supply chain logistics, in these areas, I think two things have become very clear. One is that these industries are already doing work remote, in the sense that their employees were mostly on the phone, mostly traveling around the country and doing business. But now what's become clear is that they don't need to physically be in a particular office. Second is the reliance on technology. So for many of these companies, they didn't see themselves as technology companies. But if you think about it, a logistics company is truly a technology company, because they depend so heavily on technology, whether it was in the form of telephones in the early days, in the form of fax later on, and in the form of email, and then shared documents as we're seeing now. What we are seeing is this paradigm shift where traditional logistics companies that did not necessarily fully see themselves as tech companies are now starting to understand that unless they know how to teach and coach their teams for how to best use technology, they're going to fall behind. Like, this has become something that is at the forefront of them. It's not become a cost center, but it's become an enabler for them. And this is a key differential that this situation has caused.
And before the situation, do you think the fleet industry in India was prepared to accept technology?
I think that that's been a mixed bag. Um, I would break it into three categories of people that you deal with in the fleet business in India, or let's say in the transportation business in India. First, you have the types of let's say operators who believe only in phone calls and in talking to people. Okay, and this is, I would say, an increasingly rapidly reducing cohort of people. There's not much you can do to convince them or to sell them. It needs trigger events like what we have right now with the coronavirus situation, that they will wake up and look at new ways to do business. The second cohort is, I would say, well-educated managers or mid-level managers that understand the value of technology, but don't necessarily have the knowledge of how to build the technology themselves, or how to get their organizations to adopt this technology. And the third cohort is technologists, so basically engineers or people who build technology at other organizations who've moved into the fleet industry in India. Now, the third cohort is a very small group, let's say less than 2% of the overall crowd, but they have a massive impact. They have an impact of more than 20 to 30% of the on the industry. The middle cohort is one that is now learning how to use technology. They're learning these new skills. They're learning these new, let's say, norms of how to adopt and how to implement technology. And this is the biggest opportunity for us right now. And the first cohort I mentioned is something that when they are ready for it, whether or not they're ready for it, they'll be in a situation where they will have to adopt technology. So India is in the right spot at this point in time for a change over to technology-driven transportation.
That's a good news, and that's wonderful to hear from you.
Yeah.
Shameel, is your business currently working? Is your engagement with the client currently on? And how are you going through this current situation?
Yeah, there are certain segments where we had to really tone down our operations, like travel and hospitality, because these are segments where you don't have many things to do at all, because properties are lying idle. They don't have a lot of new things to be done. Primary focus should be in get the property back in action. Then only they can do anything. So travel and hospitality kind of segments have really come down. The other segments, like I said, bigger brands are coming back because the Clootrack service as such, primarily it has been for tracking the brands. It's for brand track they use on a regular basis. It may not be the brand track which we do on a regular basis. What we're getting right now is a different kind of opportunity where people would like to understand what are the change in customer behavior with COVID. Because what we see all of a sudden is like, people going to online ways of purchasing. Like though we have Flipkarts and Amazons in India for a long time, always the online purchase has been much lesser in percentage than the offline purchase. Suddenly it is like turning the reverse. A large amount of people going online, even for banking facilities going online. They're familiarizing themselves with the tools they can use with the data connections. So that's a drastic change, and this is going to bring tremendous change in the way people behave, customers behave tomorrow. So we are getting opportunities to analyze these kind of behavioral changes. So we are working with our existing customers to help them understand how this customer change is happening. And this change, whatever is happening, one surprising aspect about us, like the change what happened in the first few weeks of the lockdown is totally different from what is happening today. So you have to keep on watching like how it is changing, and at what point you are going to reintroduce your services in the full go. So should you do a product launch right now? The surprising factors, like some of the big brands are doing product launches in May or so. So that's a very, very interesting thing which what we could find out, because we might feel this is not the right time to launch the product at all, but there are brands which are launching products at this point. So keeping a watch for these kind of changes is something which is interesting, and this we are able to help the brands with these kind of insights.
You think there is a good opportunity for new companies to come in, for instance, new grocery delivery companies or any sort of delivery companies? So do you see some new players emerging from the situation, or the big players taking a bigger chunk of it?
So one important aspect is this behavioral change. I'll tell you a example from my own experience. So as you know, I was running a grocery startup earlier, and at that point of time, if say we are giving a tech solutions to a grocery person, saying that okay, this will help you to go online, a operation with a good customer experience was very, very difficult because they were not looking at something like going online and selling, because they were more interested in selling like at their stores itself. But today, all of a sudden, almost every grocery guy out there is thinking of how I can take orders on WhatsApp and deliver it properly. So this is a big behavioral shift. And this behavioral shift is going to give opportunities for very, very new players, people who can leverage this behavioral change, what is happening at the stores, at the customers, and give more seamless solutions. So in that case, there are opportunities not only for biggies like a big basket or a grocers. There are opportunities for even small players who can leverage this kind of a change and solve the pain points in that particular aspect.
All right. So you do see some new players emerging as well, right? So new opportunities coming up.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right.
Right.
Coming back to Luke. Luke, I believe you have a sizable team, and I believe everybody is working from home. So in this situation, what steps are you taking to keep them motivated?
Yeah. So, Milind, we've basically been running as a remote team for a long time now. So it's almost a year since we've been entirely remote. We used to do some co-location days, maybe twice a week in Panjim for a little bit in between. But effectively, in some form or the other, because I've always been on the road and because a lot of my co-members are in different locations, as an organization, we are quite nomadic in many ways. And and for us, the situation with working from home is nothing new. The team is quite happy about it. I think the lockdown, which is a different thing from working at home, has probably had some effect on some team members. In fact, I was talking to one of my operations guys today, and he was saying that for him, it's taking a bit of a mental toll because he's someone who's used to being out on the ground. He's used to working out. He's used to moving around and doing things, and being locked within being confined within a small space at home is not conducive to his way of operating, and that can be quite challenging. And this is something we're looking at ways that we can help our team to address. Um, I think the working part is the easy part. I think the living part is the tougher one that we haven't yet found a way to solve.
Yep. In fact, we work with a lot of mental wellness companies in the US, and we
Okay.
see a lot of increase in the traction, and they have a lot of B2B engagements. A lot of people are
Yeah.
not used to be home quarantine for a very long
Right.
time.
Yeah.
I can totally understand your situation. Look,
Exactly.
apart from the fleet industry, uh,
Yeah.
what do you think are the new verticals opening up? New challenge, new business opportunities that will come up after this situation?
Sure. Within B2B or within B2C?
Uh, both sides
Okay.
for tech
I'll
startups.
comment. I'll start with B2B. I think that if we look at the core challenges being addressed now in a world that is less in person and more digital, identity becomes something that's quite important, right? So new approaches to dealing with identity, history, and profiles of stakeholders within the industry is a big opportunity. This could possibly be that, let's say, trigger or behavioral change event that turns the blockchain industry into something of extreme relevance in today's world. I'm no blockchain expert. I've been monitoring projects in the blockchain space for a long time, but I'm not an expert in it in any way. But definitely there's the question around identity and provenance, okay, who you're dealing with remotely. If I look at it this from the B2C space, I think the biggest opportunities are going to be in the areas where there's the biggest impact right now, right? And the biggest impact is basically mental well-being. A lot of people's mental well-being is being challenged. A lot of their beliefs about themselves are being challenged. And I think companies and organizations that are addressing this, I would categorize them into three buckets. One bucket is the kind of companies that are addressing mental health at an individual level via digital application. Second bucket is possibly companies like yours, Milind, which work with organizations that are in the mental health space and help them develop applications. This, I think, is going to be the biggest impact segment because there's a real world component and a digital component. And the third segment is companies that are in the research and data gathering side of mental health that are enabling government and sort of regulatory decisions. Because this is also going to become a bigger factor in the way countries make decisions about their people. You know, so these are three areas I would say we can look at possibly a company like Peter Thiel's company for mental health rather than for defense. Data in the mental health space that lets large organizations and large governments make better educated decisions about their people.
Yeah. And how do you think the governments across the world would open up to the tech from here on in order to be prepared for similar situations?
Yeah. So I think I'm not an expert again in governance and governments, but what we can see is that most politicians that are in major countries have become quite good at dealing with social media. Okay, so if we look at their capabilities to deal with social media, we can say that yes, they've definitely become quite good at doing this. Now, whether this implies that they are strong at adoption of technology doesn't necessarily mean that. It could be that they are strong at adoption of PR and public relations, and they learned that this tool gets them that end. But what we know is that most governments like three things. One is they like to improve their self-image. Second is they like to convince people about things. And third is they like to monitor what people are feeling and believing about things. Okay, and all these three things are part of the sort of, let's say, surveillance economy. So I think that whether governments want to or not, they're going to get involved more and more deeply in this space. China leads the way, if you can call it leading the way. In this segment, the US and India are not far behind. And I think that there are pros and cons to such surveillance states. But I think that the coronavirus situation has provided a new reason for governments to further monitor their people. And there'll be plus sides to this and there'll be downsides to this as well.
All right.
Yeah.
Shameel, how you did mention that a part of your business is impacted right now, and so would be your team as well. So how are you planning through your capex and opex during this point of time?
So in terms of planning, what we have done is we have looked at around a 10 months plan right now. So we are assuming that everything to come back like full normal. It may go in the worst case like till 10 months is what we are assuming right now. So we have put a plan for that. We have taken certain steps where we can reduce costs in multiple fronts. Assuming that, okay, if say revenue goes down, so far we have not been impacted, but if say it goes down, we have taken the steps adequately and kept the provision for all this so that we can live for without any issues for coming 10 months. And what we are assuming is that by the 10 months, we'll be back on track, hopefully, like the markets will be, and then we'll be able to act again, is what we are assuming. And the team has been like quite cooperative. So I think everybody understands it today. It's not only for us, it's for everybody out there. And everybody, the entire team has been geared up. Work from home, we moved to work from home on March 13th. From that day, we had initial couple of days of setting up and set up, but post that we have been 100% on it. We have been able to service customer requirements. We have been able to reach out to customers, talk to them. So almost all the functions have been 100% functional and so on. So this is for the plan right now. I think any company out there, what I feel we should make sure that our oxygen is there and the company's life with whatever measures it is, and then we should look out for opportunities, because as things changes, okay, maybe a new opportunity comes up, maybe something new might come up, and if at all it requires even thinking at a lower level, a big early stage of your company, we should be ready to do that, and then grab those opportunities. But primarily for enabling ourselves to grab those opportunities, the primary thing is are you having enough fuel and runway for the coming 10 to 12 months, or something which as any company all of us should be thinking about, and I think that's what we are also thinking at Clootrack.
All right, I think that's a key takeaway. 10 to 12 months is what you are looking at. Luke, what is your estimate to come back to normal?
This is a tough one to answer, Milind, in the sense that there are probably three normals here, right? One normal is the normalcy for day-to-day life of people, which doesn't look like it's going to be back to normal for the next 6 months at least, because a lot of people lost their jobs. The return to normalcy is going to take some time. Then there is normalcy from the point of view of our industry. Now, the thing about logistics is that it's the lifeblood of an economy. Once the challenges around, let's say, containing the virus or preventing the spread have been better addressed, logistics is likely to bounce back up. Maybe not to its former COVID levels in the next few months, but definitely it's going to bounce back up. And then there is normalcy from the point of view of what is the new normal? Like, what is the new normal for people once they've become used to this work at home and no need to commute to an office, or no need to make certain types of purchases. I think that a new normal will emerge somewhere in the next 4 to 6 months. And this normal will not be the normal that we had before COVID. I think that as a startup that is looking to survive and that's looking to grow and thrive, the question becomes, how do we leverage the new normal to our advantage? And I would agree with Shameel that it's going to take a few months to figure that out. You probably need to have a good runway of at least 12 months to be able to have the leeway to make the mistakes required while you test out the new ideas for the new normal.
All right. And do you, during this time, do you see it is more beneficial for the companies that are about to start, or it's an upper hand for the companies that are already in the business, like yours?
This one, again, I'd say it's highly situational. So, for example, companies that have strong revenue lines and can take care of their capex for the next, and then their opex for the next year at least, are in a strong position to leverage the existing networks of people, existing contracts, and finding new ways to leverage and monetize them. So, the opportunity to find new revenue streams or to find new ways to generate revenue from the same customers is quite strong. You don't have to worry about the sales cycle as much because you already have the relationships with people. Of course, you do need to be able to rely on your own cash flows to sustain you till your customers can afford to pay you. But for new companies that are smaller in size and more nimble, they can afford to test out different hypotheses quite quickly without much of an overhead of cost. And they have the advantage of being able to go in at a lower valuation to raise funding. So they can afford to possibly have a longer runway than you do with less overhead to figure out which runway to even move on, you know. So I think it's very situational. I'd say the most potent situation right now is an experienced founder who has a network, who has deep industry experience, has access to investors, and has an insight into 2 or 3 possible solutions that leverages prior network. If that person is able to validate these ideas in a short amount of time, he's likely going to find investors to back him up, and he's likely going to have a long runway to prove or disprove that hypothesis. So, Milind, sound like you could be in a good place.
Yes, definitely. So, guys, I think we have had a lot of good insights coming out from today's session. We would love to keep it short. We would love to keep the important points that we would go ahead and pull it out for our viewers to take it ahead from here.
Well, thanks, Shameel, and thanks, Milind.
Yep. Thank you guys for. Yep. This is trust me. This is a lot of wonderful insights coming up, and if I trace back to my experiences 9 years back when I started, for somebody who's just starting up and does not have enough experience into this situation had to come, then it would have been a lot of trouble. And even for seasoned entrepreneurs, there are certain points and key takeaways that we can learn from each other. And unfortunately, during the lockup times, we are not able to meet, interact, and network with people. So I believe there are a lot of good insights that have come through this session. And I want to thank you for taking out time from your busy schedules. I know how busy you are, but still taking out time so somebody else can learn from the experiences that we are having and the plans that we have. So thank you, Shameel. Thank you, Luke. And I look forward for further engagements with you and taking further more initiatives on this. Thank you so much.
Certainly. Thanks
Milind, for arranging.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shameel.
Bye-bye.
I'll keep you posted as soon as we have it live.